Keith Urban is on stage for his first show since Nicole Kidman filed for divorce.
Golden couple had separated after 19 years of marriage.
For a long time after the divorce, Keith Urban said almost nothing. Not because he lacked feelings, and not because there was no story to tell, but because some stories feel too sacred to explain while the wounds are still fresh. Certain experiences, especially those shaped by love and loss, demand silence before they can be spoken aloud. For Keith, this was one of them. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were never just another celebrity couple. To the public, they symbolized resilience. Their relationship stood as proof that love could survive addiction, fame, pressure, and time. They represented hope, the idea that even in the harsh glare of Hollywood, something real could endure. So when their marriage ended, people searched desperately for a scandal that never came. There were no explosive accusations, no messy public feuds, no dramatic revelations to satisfy curiosity. Instead, there was silence. And in that silence, curiosity slowly transformed into speculation. Keith understood that silence would be misinterpreted. He knew people would fill in the blanks with their own assumptions, projecting narratives where facts were absent. But he also understood something deeper. Speaking too soon would risk turning something profoundly personal into something careless. For years, he chose to protect Nicole not by defending her publicly, but by refusing to reduce their life together into headlines or sound bites. Their history deserved more respect than that. When Keith finally did speak about the marriage after the divorce, what he revealed wasn't shocking. There was no accusation, no betrayal, no villain in his version of the story. Instead, he spoke about something far more uncomfortable and far more relatable. The truth about how love can exist alongside loss, and how gratitude, when left unchecked, can quietly turn into imbalance. When Keith and Nicole first came together, their relationship was built on survival. Keith has never hidden his struggles. He was open about his battles with addiction, about how sobriety was not just a decision but a daily commitment. During that period, Nicole became more than a partner. She became a safe place. She stood beside him when staying sober required strength he didn't always feel he had. Keith has never denied that. In fact, he has always spoken of her with deep reverence and gratitude. That reverence, however, shaped the marriage in ways he didn't fully understand at the time. Keith often described himself as the lucky one, the saved one, the man given a second chance at life and love. But years later, with distance and reflection, he came to realize something difficult to admit. Gratitude, when unbalanced, can slowly silence your own needs. He wasn't unhappy. He wasn't unloved. But he was quietly shrinking inside a role he never questioned, because it felt wrong to ask for more when he believed he had already been given so much. When you see yourself as the one who was rescued, it becomes easy to accept less space, less voice, less emotional presence without complaint. From the outside, everything appeared calm. Red carpet appearances, award shows, supportive interviews, shared smiles. There were no obvious cracks. But inside the marriage, a subtle emotional distance was growing. It didn't announce itself loudly. There were no explosive arguments or dramatic moments signaling the end. Instead, there were long stretches of emotional quiet. Conversations became practical rather than intimate. Connection gave way to coordination. Both were carrying weight but in different ways, and no longer setting it down together. This was the point at which Keith began to speak openly about something that had quietly shaped his perception of Nicole for years. After the divorce, many expected him to describe her as distant, cold, or emotionally unavailable. Instead, Keith went in a completely different direction. He spoke about Nicole's strength, but not the kind of strength most people see. He described a strength forged through survival, shaped by a lifetime of composure. A strength that came from holding oneself together when life demanded more than most people could bear. It wasn't that Nicole lacked vulnerability. It was that she had learned to carry it privately, without letting anyone else see. Over time, Keith realized that the very quality that inspired admiration, the way she remained steady in any storm, also came with an unseen cost. Nicole was the steady one, the constant presence, the person everyone could rely on. In every situation, she maintained balance, composure, and groundedness, often at the expense of her own emotional needs. She held the family, the home, and the relationship together, quietly absorbing pressure that might have broken others. People admired her composure, but Keith began to see that it wasn't just strength, it was exhaustion accumulating slowly over time. Nicole had given so much, held so much, and carried so much that the weight eventually became overwhelming. Her steadiness, which had long been a source of comfort for everyone around her, quietly became her burden. Keith reflected on how imbalance rarely appears suddenly. It grows patiently, unnoticed, until the person holding everything together finally feels the strain. She kept giving long after the balance was gone, long after emotional equilibrium had shifted. What surprised people most, Keith said, wasn't what she lacked. It was the depth of what she gave. He didn't see Nicole as cold or distant. He saw someone who poured herself into everything and everyone, often until there was nothing left to spare. She held things together long after they stopped feeling balanced, long after they stopped feeling fair. And in the end, that relentless giving, the quiet, unshakable strength, led not to weakness or withdrawal, but to exhaustion. The cost of being human, while also being extraordinary. Keith's words were a revelation. Sometimes the strongest people aren't unbreakable. They're simply carrying more than anyone else can see. In acknowledging this, Keith also accepted his role in allowing that imbalance to exist. He admitted that he leaned into her strength instead of meeting her there. The marriage didn't end because love disappeared. It ended because love alone couldn't fix an emotional misalignment that went unspoken for too long. There were moments, Keith admitted, when he sensed something was changing but didn't know how to name it. Instead of confronting it directly, he assumed time would smooth things over. But time didn't soften the distance, it clarified it. The divorce wasn't an explosion, it was an acceptance. A quiet understanding that neither of them was wrong, but neither of them was fully whole anymore. Keith didn't fight the ending. As he later explained, forcing something to survive when it's asking to change is a different kind of loss. Letting go felt painful, but it also felt honest. What haunted him most afterward wasn't anger or regret, it was guilt. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet realization that someone you love carried more than you noticed. He spoke about this carefully, never placing blame, only accountability. He acknowledged that gratitude can sometimes mask dependency, and that dependency can slowly erode equality without either person intending it. Fame complicated everything. Every move was watched. Every silence was questioned. Keith felt pressure not just to heal, but to heal correctly in the eyes of the public. But healing doesn't follow scripts. Some days he missed her deeply. Other days he understood exactly why they had to let go. Both emotions existed at the same time, and neither canceled the other out. What Keith wanted people to understand most was this: Nicole was not the villain of his story, and he was not the villain of hers. She was a woman who loved fiercely, held space for others, and eventually needed that space back. For herself. He continued to speak about her with respect, even admiration, because endings don't erase the truth of what once was. As time passed, Keith began to change, not in ways visible to the public, but in the quiet corners of his heart and mind. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There were no sudden revelations or reinventions. Instead, it was subtle, profound, and deeply internal. He became more aware of emotional balance. He started noticing the small, quiet signals he once overlooked, the gentle cues of tension, the unspoken needs that had always existed beneath the surface. He began being honest with himself in ways he never had before, recognizing desires and limits he had buried under gratitude and routine. The divorce didn't harden him. It softened him. It forced him to face parts of himself he had avoided, hiding behind the comfort of being the grateful one, the one who endured quietly without complaint. What Keith misses isn't simply Nicole herself. It's the version of life they shared when love felt effortless, when connection flowed naturally, when hearts didn't keep score. He misses the ease of shared laughter, the unspoken understanding, the moments when giving and receiving felt balanced. But what he has come to accept is this: effort, no matter how genuine, without true alignment, eventually turns into sacrifice. And sacrifice, when carried alone, has a quiet, corrosive effect. Even in relationships built on love and trust, giving without balance can lead to frustration, tension, and eventually resentment. Keith has learned that love isn't just about giving. It's about giving in harmony, in a rhythm both partners can sustain. His truth isn't meant to rewrite the past, but to humanize it. To show that even the most admired marriages are made of two imperfect people learning as they go. Sometimes they grow together. Sometimes they grow apart. Neither outcome is a failure. Today, Keith speaks with clarity. He honors the past without idealizing it. He carries gratitude without allowing it to define him completely. And in doing so, he honors Nicole, not by holding on to what was, but by respecting why it had to end. In the end, the truth Keith revealed wasn't about secrets or scandal. It was about emotional honesty arriving later than expected. About love that didn't die, but changed shape. And about the courage it takes to admit that sometimes letting go is the most loving thing you can do, for the other person and for yourself. And perhaps that's why this story lingers. Because it reminds us that not all endings are loud, and not all truths are dramatic. Some are quiet, some are painful, and some take years before they can finally be said out loud.